You're listening to The Collected Podcast, bringing you stories that remind us who God is and who we are in Him. The Collected Podcast is a production of Collected Ministries. Follow Collected on social media at Collected Podcast, and be sure to visit thecollectedpodcast.com for show notes and additional content related to today's episode.
Welcome to Season 5, Episode 13 of the Collected Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Biondo, and today I'm very excited to bring you a conversation with Brett Boner. He is a financial planner or advisor. He'll tell you a little bit more about that and what that means. A former golf pro, and God has just had him on a crazy journey with something that happened in his life that changed the course of everything. So Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So as we dive in, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about how you came to know the Lord and, how you ended up on this path that you're on now and doing what you're doing now and all of that.
Wow. There's a long story of how I guess where I am now, but
I might only have to ask one question, and
no,
we're good for 30 minutes.
I won't go that long on one question. But so when I was a child, my mom had me and my sister going to church quite often, and I grew up in a small town in Alabama called Gadsden, Alabama. And we were Presbyterians, and my dad was Catholic. So it was just really my mom and my sister and I that went to church together. And my dad would really not go to church back then. And he does now, which is a great thing. But it was a church where you would be there Sunday morning, a lot of times Sunday evening. And I can remember when I was 12 years old, after a Sunday school lesson, I was at my grandparents' house like we typically would do on a Sunday afternoon after church. And I can remember I was in their backyard, went behind a tree and asked the Lord to come into my heart. And it's actually pretty emotional just thinking about that. But I will never forget that. And people ask me that all the time. And, and did I fully realize what it meant then? I don't know. Probably not. But I can remember the Sunday school teacher and the way she explained it. And I just felt encouraged to do it that day. My path at that point was volatile, as most kids were. And that can take on a couple of meanings. I continued to go to church with my mom, but also I had most of my friends went to a different church growing up, and they went to this Baptist church, and it was very different from where I was going. And it was more brimstone and fire, but for some reason I was more comfortable there. And then I go to college at Auburn, and I would go to church very often. Did RUF during the week, Reformed University Fellowship. In between there, I would act up, and I would go back to church on Sunday to ask for forgiveness. And, like I said, it was just volatile. But it's always been a part of my heart and a part of my mind. And I can tell you, more later about kind of what's transpired to get me on the path I am now. Yeah.
So you ended up maybe during college and post-college being a golfer.
Yes.
So what did that look like? I mean, what lessons can we learn about God through golf?
Grew up playing golf and basketball, and but golf really took a big place in my life when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. Started playing in tournaments, started playing well. And when I got to high school, it was a dream of mine to play college golf, and I got that opportunity at Auburn. So I was on the golf team at Auburn, played for 4 years there. And afterwards, and to be honest with you, I didn't take advantage of my opportunity at Auburn. Had some good tournaments and some good golf at times, but it was very inconsistent, probably because my priorities were very inconsistent. But my father saw the ability and talent. And so when I graduated college, he said, hey, before working in the real world, go give this golf thing a shot. And I did, and started playing really good golf. I mean, I think it was a good thing to get away from from college, from Auburn, and I graduated and started playing professionally and started playing well. And I just kept going, and I did it for 9 years. And I would say the first probably the first 4 were really good. And I met my wife and got married. And I put a ton of pressure on myself to make it to the PGA Tour, and didn't do that. And then the last few years were really good. And but after 9 years, 32 years old, not making any money, wanted to start a family, it was time. And so I gave it up at the beginning of 2006 and became a financial advisor that year. And I've been with the same firm since then.
Wow. I mean,
I didn't really answer your question about God and golf.
I know it's kind of a random question.
No, it's not. I mean, it's hard. You know, you're on the road. I was probably on the road 30 to 34 weeks a year. That you're playing on Sunday or traveling on Sunday, so you don't really go to church. You find pockets of small men's group, but very rarely. And so it was a challenge. I would also say that I was probably back then praying for the wrong things when it comes to my golf and my career, and asking God, why am I not making it yet? Aren't I a good guy kind of thing?
Yeah.
Aren't I doing everything you want me to be doing, which I wasn't, I'm sure. And so it was a challenge. Some great times, and my wife was an unbelievable supporter of that, as the sacrifices she made were amazing. But it was a great experience. I met so many wonderful people, lifelong friends. I got to see the world, but it was time. So,
yeah. Well, and you mentioned prayer, and I feel like there's someone out there who is praying for things and they don't feel like God is moving. They don't see any answers. They feel like their prayers are just going off into nothingness. What maybe wisdom or hope or encouragement might you have for them?
Great question. And it's interesting that you bring that particular comment up, because I'm in a men's small group now that I lead. And I have a co-leader, thankfully, because this is new to me. But a guy in my group, as the co-leader says, we have a bunch of misfits in our group, which is great, right? A bunch of tire kickers. And this guy said, sometimes I feel like I'm on this journey alone, and there's no one really listening, or I don't hear the answers, or it's just the length of time between prayer or visibility on the other side of that prayer can be discouraging. And the co-leader, who's been doing small men's groups for 20 plus years, he referenced us to David, and in the Psalms, how many times David asked the Lord, "Are you listening? Are you here? How long was it going to be? How long? How long? How long?"
Yeah.
And you see one of the greatest figures in the Bible struggle with the same thing. Our timeline is obviously very different than the Lord's, and it is. I think it just comes down to faith. Like if our faith is there, we have to trust that He's working, no matter if we see and hear it. And it's hard. It is not easy. It's not like I think it's a great question for anybody, a believer or non-believer. I think it's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, I don't know, it's easy to feel like it doesn't even matter. Why am I even praying? Like, I've been praying the same thing for years, or, weeks or months or years, however long. But I want someone out there to hear too. It's not in vain. Like, God hears and He cares, and His answer might not be what you want or what you expect, but He always cares and always listens, even when it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, I know.
So back to your story. So I know something pretty big happened in your life that kind of changed things for you. So I was wondering if you could dive into that for us.
Yes. So like I said, I've been a financial advisor since 2006 with Carroll Financial, which is now a Wealth Enhancement Group. And it's been a blessing. It's been a lot of fun. I love being a part of families' financial lives. Just today, I had a meeting with clients, and to see the expression on their faces of, oh, that makes sense, or wow, I'm so glad we came in today, is what the lady said. And, that's the rewarding part of my job. And I don't look at it as a job. I really don't. But it's just been so rewarding to be a part of people's financial lives. But there's a lot that happened in my life, or has happened in my life, between 2006 and 2021 when I had this accident. And a lot of ins and outs. I mean, we have two great kids, a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, very healthy, thankfully. Very good kids, great marriage. Thankfully, I tell people I have a unicorn of a wife, and he's just a strong believer. And so fast forward to May 2021. I am at lunch on Monday, the May 10th, with a friend from church. And at the time, our pastor and his wife were going through a tough time with one of their children. And I just really struggled with how hard that was on them. And I really struggled with, really honestly, why God was allowing that to happen, because here's a guy that is head of our church and taking care of the people of its church, and he's having to focus on something that's taking his attention away from the church. Something that to me didn't seem fair. Like, you would think that that would be the last thing he would have to do, is something with one of his children. And so I literally said at lunch that day, I said, Eric, I'm really struggling with this, and I don't understand why it's happening to them. I said, honestly, I've never had anything really bad happen in my life. I said those words, and I said, I lost out on a dream of playing on the PGA Tour. But knock on wood, I never had any major illnesses in my family even. I never had a close family member have cancer. I've never seen the struggle of that. And I get home from work that day. I was telling my wife about our conversation. It was also back when, we're pretty much still in the middle of COVID. And as you can remember, and still to this day, there's just so much vitriol in the world and hate. And I told Lindsay, I literally told her that night, right before this happened, I said, she's just the two of us eating dinner at home. I said, I hate humans. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm just so tired of all of this. And it just wears me down. And part of it is me paying attention to the wrong things, me being on news or social media or what have you. And so I learned some big lessons around that too. Well, within the next half hour, I'm driving to AG Middle School to pick up our son at soccer practice. And it's a beautiful night, Monday, May the 10th. Had the sunroof down, listening to Jimmy Buffett, I can remember. And I turned left on Wendover Road, and on Sharon Road, about 200 or 300 yards down, out of the corner of my eye, or out of my peripheral vision, I see this big thing start moving, and there's a big tree limb falling off a Bradford pear tree. And there was no way I was going to be able to stop, but I slammed on the brakes, and it simultaneously, big limb landed in the middle of the road, and my car hit it. And I come to a stop after a couple of loud noises, and I'm awake and stunned, and I put the car in park, and I turn the radio down, and guy knocks on my window. I roll the window down, and he's like, hey man, and he looked down at my chest, he looked at me, and he looked down at my chest again, and he said, hey, I'm going to call 911. Who else should I call? And then I just noticed there was this big tree limb right over my steering wheel through my window. And so I told him to call my wife, and he called Lindsay, and she didn't answer, of course, because she didn't know the number. And he texted her and said, ma'am, please pick up. It's about your husband, which obviously no one wants to get that kind of text. Anyway, that tree limb that fell in the road I hit it and it flipped it up in the air, and another big limb connected to that limb went right through my windshield and into my chest. And it impaled me about 5 inches deep. And thankfully it was on the right side, and kind of went through my pec and under my arm, and tore me up pretty good. But as unlucky as it was, obviously it could have been a lot worse. It could have been the left side. It could have been my face, my neck. So anyway, I was in the car for 30 minutes. They couldn't get me out. But by the time Lindsay got there were 3 fire trucks and 2 medics and about 8 police cars. It was a mess, and they had to use the jaws of life to get me out, rush me to the hospital, emergency surgery, and wake up. And Lindsay tells me where I am and what's happening. And it was about 1 a.m. And the next day, the doctors come in and the surgeons that did the surgery and kind of give us a full report. I've got 4 broken ribs. I got a collapsed lung. I've got shredded pec muscle, a torn serratus muscle, torn bicep, lacerated liver. And so you just start hearing all these things. And then they say, oh yeah, by the way, the main artery from your arm to your chest was sitting there dangling in the wind while everything else around it was completely shredded. And so they said the words, you should have bled out in your car.
Oh my gosh.
And so, yeah, to hear that was, like I said, very emotional. So I was in the hospital for 10 days. Finally got the lung to reinflate, which was the main thing. And I got to go home. Didn't get to see my kids for 10 days, only FaceTimed a couple times. And I was pretty banged up, so it was hard on them too. But the first person besides Lindsay that came to the hospital was our pastor. And, he says, there's something amazing going to come to this. And I told him the story the day before about talking about him and talking about how nothing bad had ever happened to me. And here I am in this hospital room, completely feeling helpless, but at the same time feeling hopeful. And so it was a wild ride after that, a lot of PT. I think, so I had another surgery in January of 22. So between the accident and the surgery, my wife and I counted about 80 to 90 physical therapy sessions in clinic, not to mention what I did at home. Obviously, golf's a big part of my life. So I was away from golf for a year, which is a good thing because it was and still can be a false idol of mine, and kind of an identity puller. But just the thing that came of this was me telling Lindsay, I hate humans. And yet how many amazing humans showed up, right?
Yeah.
In our lives and kept my family together. Was just so special. And so, we had our church community, was there obviously the most, just the things they did to step up, the food, the errands, taking our kids places. And I've always been reluctant to really ingrain myself in a church community. I've always felt like, okay, I'll be there on Sunday morning and I'll do my Tuesday morning men's group, and that's enough. I don't want to air all my dirty laundry to my community group and my church. And yet I had made that leap about a year before that and had joined a community group with Lindsay. And so that was fantastic that they were there for us. And just all these amazing people showed up. And God just showed me how I was so focused on the wrong people, and I still could be focused on reading the wrong things or looking at the wrong things. And you just take for granted who in your life is important and cares for you and truly cares for you, and loves you. And so that was the number one thing that came back from this, was the community and focusing on the wrong things. So I used the word intimidating. I don't know if I said that yet or not, but I was very intimidated, because I was still alive. And when Gordon said to me, something really good's going to come of this. It's just extremely intimidating to think, okay, well, first off, what is it? I love to live and fast forward. I love to know like what my schedule looks like for the next month, 6 months, 8 months, plan things out. My son, it'll be Wednesday, and Lindsay and I want to know, like, what are you going to do Friday and Saturday night? My son still this day like, I don't know, Dad. He goes, just live. It's fine, just live. I'm like, well, your dad likes to go to sleep at a decent hour, so I like to know what's going on. But I love to live and fast forward. It was like as that limb was coming down, I said this before. I said it was like God said, let me take the wheel, because you need to slow down. And you need to just take a step back and let me show you some things in your life that are amazing that you are not seeing. And so for 2 years, I had been asked to do this Search Ministries, what's called Q School, which is very interesting because if you know anything about golf, and you might not, to get to the PGA Tour, you have to go through what's called a Q School. And I failed 7 times to get to a PGA Tour. And then Search Ministries, which I don't know if you know what Search is, but it's a great men's ministry that has been in Charlotte for, I think, close to 40 years. But it goes around and it's sharing God's word with businessmen and starting small groups in the corporate world. And they have this Q School where you go through this year-long thing of really training on how to lead small groups and how to start small groups. And they'd asked me twice already, and I said no. Just intimidated. I want to be part of a small group, but I can't imagine leading one. And so I'm now alive, and they asked me again, and I couldn't wait to say yes. And I'm thankful they asked me again. So I did Q School in 21, 22. And if we ever get to know each other better, you'll know that if I sign up for something, I'm going to follow through. It's just a pet peeve of mine. Like, I just feel like if I ask somebody to do something, they say yes, I want them to follow through with me. So I started a small group back in September. And it's been amazing. In your prayer before this, you said, God, just show up and lead the conversation. And going back to me wanting to have a plan for everything, I want everything to be perfect. And this co-leader that's leading with me, he's like, God's going to show up. If you don't feel like you're prepared, it's okay. The conversation will happen, and it's going to take shape however God wants it to. And so I'm being very long-winded here, but that has been an amazing blessing. I've got guys that have never been in a small group, but I asked if they're interested, and they said, love to do it with you. And they asked some very tough questions about things we just talked about, like why isn't he showing up? Where is he?
Yeah.
And so, but it has been a blessing, and I look forward to it every Tuesday morning. We do it here in my office. I got to speak. What's interesting is also for my accident is this is the 5th kind of speaking engagement I've done, which I'd never done one about my faith or myself. And this is the 5th one. And so the doors that is open from that, and the very first one I did, no, I did the church first. The second one I did was for this Search Ministries group. They asked me to speak in the backyard. Once a quarter, they get anywhere from 60 to 80 guys together and bring a speaker in. And I spoke in November of 21 about what had happened, 5-6 months earlier. And a guy came up to me afterwards, and I'd heard his name before, never met him. And he's just got tears rolling down his face. And he just said, you have no idea what your message means to me and what's going on in my life, and how I can resonate. This all resonates to me. Well, fast forward 1 month, and that guy was laying in his bed one night, and his son came into his room and said he almost took his life. And now that guy's in my men's small group.
Oh.
So it's been an amazing journey from that accident, sitting in my car trapped, hearing that I could have and should have died, and getting to lead men, hopefully to the Lord, to a stronger relationship, has just been an amazing gift. So,
wow. I mean, that is just so amazing too, what God can do when we just say yes. Like, yeah, I'll speak, or yeah, I'll do the class, or yeah, I'll lead the men's group, or, whatever it is, when we just say yes, when he opens a door for us, he can take it further than we ever imagined.
He really can.
So good.
He really can. And
so gracious.
I was always reluctant sometimes to walk through that door. I think for fear of ego, for fear of what it means that I've got to now potentially do, or how I need to act differently, or, I don't know. I was always reluctant to do that. And now it's interesting. Lindsay is the one and I get it. She's more skittish in the car now. She's more skittish around, like, we love to hike. And when we go hiking and we'll go to the mountains, and I say, I'm going to go on a hike by myself. She's like, no, you're not.
There's a lot of trees in the mountains.
Right. And exactly. And I'm just like, I don't know. Something has changed where I don't fear death. I don't fear, I don't know. It's just different for me.
If God can save you after you were impaled, he can save you from anything.
That's right. And
you're not leaving this earth till it's your time to go.
Well, that's exactly right. And, listening to one of the podcasts you did recently, I told you I listened to it with Hadley. Is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that quote that I think she said her husband says, it's not over till it's good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. That's an incredible quote. I've shared it already multiple times. That is not over till it's good. And that can take on a lot of meanings, but I know what he's saying. I know what he was saying.
Yeah.
I think on the same podcast, either you said it or she said it, that also resonated amazingly with me was, this didn't happen for your past, but happened for your future.
Yeah.
And so for me to think about what's happened since my accident in just this 2 short years, exponentially different than the previous 47 for me. So it's been awesome. It really has. People say, man, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I am too. I wish I wouldn't have my family wouldn't have had to go through that, but I think it's going to be the best thing that ever happened in my life.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Since the accident, what have you learned about the character of God with everything you've gone through?
Well, one of my favorite verses has always been, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And I had a different meaning of that. I used to think that I can do all great things. I can do all things that I want that end up with a great ending for me. So, in golf, and I think that's fine too. I do like, Lindsay, I had a great, amazing golf experience in 2018. And you can see behind me, I was the runner-up in the United States Mid-Amateur Championship. I lost in the finals, and Lindsay asked me, she's like, it was 10 rounds. I walked over 70 miles in 6 days. She's like, how are you doing this? And I just kept saying, I kept saying that over and over and over again, that I can do all things. Well, but I think that means I can do all things, even the bad things, through Christ, right? Who strengthens me. And I was not looking at it the right way. And so God's character to me says, yeah, there is no perfect roadmap. In fact, it's going to be messy. But that's okay. That is okay. Because you can still do it. You can still get through it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he is so good and faithful to provide. I like that. I can do all things, even the hard things.
Yep.
He will never leave us in the valleys.
No.
He's right there by our side, guiding us through.
And Lindsay, she had this, and I found this months after my accident. I found this on our in our study, even on a piece of paper that I don't know why it was out. Maybe I was looking through her Bible. I don't know, but the verse that got her through my accent in that whole week was Psalm 91:4, when he talks about, I will protect you with my feathers, and like I think it says, I will shelter you from really any mess that I create. And she just said, Brett, that got me through, because so many unknowns for her, right? I mean, she was wearing so many hats that week, trying to take care of our children and keep them calm. My parents obviously drove up the next day, and she's having to put up with them in the house and all the questions they have, having to go to the hospital, keep notes what all the doctors are saying, and excuse me. So anyway, like I said, she's an incredible woman.
Oh, so we are almost out of time, and
wow,
I know
I talked too long.
No, that's what you're supposed to do. You've done a great job. As we wrap up, what did I miss? What is a final word of encouragement or hope or challenge or story that you'd like to leave us with today?
Man, honestly, I was afraid you were going to ask me that. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't have a great quick one-liner that's going to be powerful, but for me, like you said, don't be afraid to say yes. I was afraid to for so long, and I said no. And I said no in a lot of ways in life, not just to go to the Search Ministries Q School, right? I would at times hang out with the wrong people, and I knew I was. And then my heart was just churning, saying, this isn't you. Or, I just think that God has been, he's been the one consistent thing in my life. And Search Ministries has this thing where when you and God are close together, and we are all going to wander, and we're going to drift. And if the one that drifts, it's not God. Yeah. God is always there, and we're going to be the ones that drift, and it's okay. And he just wants us to come back to him.
Yeah.
And I've always just, ever since I heard that, I loved that. If you feel distance from God, it's not God. It's you. Right. Yeah. And we all struggle with that, right? Finding time to be in prayer, finding time to be in the Word. And the only way to do that is to be consistent. And I know that my life seems to have a lot more meaningful time, a lot less reactionary stress when I'm in that Word. So that's been the blessing for me.
Yeah. That is amazing. Brett, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I loved hearing Brett's story and the ways that God showed up in such a crazy situation where, from the world's perspective, he shouldn't have made it. He should have died, and yet God saved him and is using his story in such powerful ways to inspire and encourage others and to point them to the Father. And it's just so good. As he was talking, I was thinking about Psalm 23, specifically verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And just the way that God was with Brett every step of the way. And he's with us. And that part, for you are with me, that's the promise of God. That's how we are able to not fear, because we know God's presence is with us. And his promise to us is his presence. The promise of God is himself. He is with us. Even if we can't feel it or see it, God is always there. He hears those prayers like we were talking about in the interview. Even if he feels distant, those feelings are not reality, because the truth that the Bible tells us is that he is near. So if he feels distance, call that out as a lie that the devil's trying to get you to believe that you're alone and that nobody cares and that God has left you. Those are all lies, because the truth that the Bible tells us is that the Lord is near, and he promises to stay near no matter what we're going through those valleys, on the mountaintops, wherever you are, God is there. Where can we flee from his presence? That's what the Bible says. If we go to the depths, you are there. If I go to the heights, you are there. All the places, God is there. And I know I've needed that reminder and encouragement for the past couple weeks. So I just hope that brings you some peace and encouragement as well. Just rest in him, nestle into him in the shelter of his wings, that other verse that Brett's wife was clinging to during that hard time. So I just hope you have a wonderful week. I'm sending you lots of love from across the airwaves, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Collected Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you like what you've heard, we'd love it if you'd help spread the word. Check back here for new episodes dropping every other Thursday. You can follow along on social media at Collected Ministries.